Hello, my friends. Hello. It's Matthew Street, and welcome from the bottom of my heart to my channel. I really appreciate it. And folks, this is a tough one to make because this is the final review reaction video I will ever make for the brand new Beatles film Get Back, directed by Peter Jackson and streaming on Disney+. I'm trying to sum up my feelings here, folks. Let me start this way with this video. Have you ever had that perfect day with a loved one or a special person in your life, significant other, family, friend, lover, whatever, and you were on the beach for a walk as the sun went down and you watched the sunset together? Or you had that special time you shared with a friend, perhaps just quietly listening to music or sharing a hobby together. And you didn't want it to end. You just wanted it to keep going. You just wished that that little moment in time, that special moment, would never, ever end. That you could somehow capture that moment. And as Jim Croce used to say, just take that time, that moment, and put it in a bottle and save it forever. That's how I felt these past 3 days, folks, and especially while watching part 3 of Get Back. In other words, I felt such joy and happiness as I was watching this final episode, and yet there was this melancholy feeling that came over me, and I was like, please, don't let this end. Please, don't let this end. And yet, to coin a phrase, so to speak, from George Harrison, I knew that all good things must pass and must end. So let me pick it up with part 3 here and some of the little points and moments that struck me deep within and really touched my heart and touched my soul. Just some things I noticed. Okay, I'll try to get through this. I want to get it done within 20 minutes. Okay, so we come into this day 17, beginning of part 3, and obviously the rooftop show is imminent. It's coming within a couple of few days. And I love the opening of part 3 because you have George assisting Ringo with Octopus's Garden. Such a team effort with the two guys. You can feel the closeness between them on the screen. You feel it. And then John eventually comes in. He jumps right in on drums. Billy Preston is present. You could just feel the closeness of these guys and how they really want to help Ringo with this song. It's just unbelievable. We saw bits of that in the original Let It Be film. Now, eventually, Linda and Heather and Paul come in, and it's really cute. There's some baby kitten talk between John and young Heather, and it's so funny. I just thought it was a really funny moment, and John with his wit with a young child, and you can just see John relating to Heather in such a funny way. And one of my general thoughts I had during this whole segment with Heather being there is like, the first thing I thought of is, you can really tell a lot about a person as to how they respond and relate to a young child. When an adult meets a child for the first time or is in the presence of a child, you can really learn a lot about them for how they react and respond to that child. Now, obviously with Paul, with Heather, it's apparent, the closeness he has with Heather. But, even John, Ringo, being playful with Heather around the drum set, and to some extent you see a little bit with George smiling at her and stuff, Mal and Glenn, you can just see it. But one observation I made, and I'm not being critical, folks, I'm just making general observations as I watched part 3, but Yoko seems out of sorts around Heather. She seems detached. The little girl's right around Yoko in her physical space, and yet you don't get much of a response from Yoko towards Heather. Now, it's not a put down of Yoko. If anything, I felt a little sympathy for Yoko as I watched this. Like I said, geez, this woman looks a little damaged. And we know, Yoko had a tough past. Perhaps her self-esteem is a little bit damaged, or she's had that rough background from what we know of Yoko's past as a young person. She didn't have the best background. You could just see it. Her inability to show connection or emotion towards a young child is very telling, in my opinion. You can see like maybe Yoko has some type of damage emotionally. Or, you could say it's self-absorption. She's so into who she is that she can't give of an emotion to a young child like that. I don't know. I'm not trying to be pop psychologist here, but I just thought it was very telling as I watched that segment how others responded to Heather and how Yoko, her non-response to Heather, in my mind was very telling. Let me know what you think. I did love the very constructive discussions in the control room on this day. Very friendly. I love the control room stuff, and there's more of it as the days go on. And I just think that stuff in the control room is gold. The way they're responding to one another, the way they're getting into the music as they listen to the playbacks. Great stuff. Then there's, more workups of songs, and at one point Yoko is wailing in the mic briefly, and it's funny how Peter edited this because right after that there's a segment where Heather is wailing in the microphone. And you hear someone call her Yoko or something, and actually Heather's wailing in the mic sounds better than Yoko's wailing in the microphone. No offense to Yoko, but I was like, oh my God, it kind of shows the silliness of what Yoko does. I mean, some people out there probably still think it's art or something. I don't. But when Heather can kind of blow Yoko out of the water with the wailing in the microphone stuff, what does that tell you about the wailing in the microphone stuff? Okay, just, again, not a slam, just an observation. Great song workups follow, having joyous fun. Dig It is really cool. Fun segment. Paul's tossing Heather in the air as they cut back and forth. They do a rock and roll medley, which is really, really fun. Very engaging. Even George, he's having fun with a little microphone, putting it up to his neck and making funny noises and that. Very silly to see, it's so cool to see George, to see him happy and in the zone, at this point at Apple. Just to see, because George always gets a reputation of being kind of a grumpy guy during this period. But to see him really engaged in things and having some fun really made me feel good, I have to say. So they checking around in the control room, and then that's over, and then that's the end of that. Day 18, the next day, Monday the 27th, another playback in the control room. We're listening back to the rock and roll oldies and stuff, and it's very relaxed. It's fun moments, dancing around. You got Paul and John doing a little twisting each other, dancing to the oldies music that they recorded the day before. A lot of smiles, a lot of laughs. They're grooving. Really fun stuff. Even Yoko, I'll give her credit here. She seems to be into it a little bit and smiling and stuff. So kudos to Yoko there. The next segment is very cool because you have George on piano, which is very rare to see him on piano, and a fabulous segment with him working out Old Brown Shoe and, telling John, hey, you've always told me when I get him in my head, finish him right away. Don't let him hang. And that's pretty cool that he wrote the song a day or two before, and he was giving John credit for giving him that motivational push. And even Paul is engaged with Old Brown Shoe. He's dancing to it. Paul jumps on the drums, and Ringo gets on the drums. Billy's on the bass. Paul's on the Telecaster. Really cool how they're helping George out, work out Old Brown Shoe. I thought that was really nice and cool. They just seem so enthused, so engaged with each other's songs. That's what I liked. At this point, I made note of that. Wow, when someone else has a song, whether it's Ringo with Octopus's Garden, George with Old Brown Shoe, or a Paul song or a John song, they all get behind it and they all seem to be enthused about working it out. So give them all credit for that. A fun spot with Paul reading an article about John and Yoko from the paper. They're all around the piano and having some good laughs about it, even Yoko. I thought that was a cool little moment. And you get a nice brief snippet of Paul playing Strawberry Fields Forever. Very brief, but very touching. Very nice. And like I said, as this day is going on, and we're getting into part 3, everyone seems to be getting happier and happier. They're getting more comfortable as time goes on. They're more comfortable with each other, having fun with each other. That's the feeling I got. Then there's a cool Get Back segment that I took note of. Nice workout on Get Back. It's very tight. John is way into it, and it's just really cool how they get back into the control room and start listening to it, and this stuff is gold. As I said, when they're in that control room and they're all huddled together in a very tight quarters listening, it's very awesome, folks. John is almost taking a leadership role at this point. This is the final LP version of Get Back they're listening to, and you can just tell John's into it. They're all really into it and really cool. This is very cool. They're listening to workups of other songs, and I looked at one point and to see Ringo, he's leaning on Paul and kind of encouraging Paul in the control room, and I thought that was very touching to see Ringo, that close to Paul with his arm around him and kind of giving him some encouragement. Very cool. January 28th, day 19, which is Tuesday, a really fab workout on an early version of Something. I really, really love this part. I thought it was fabulous. One of the greatest love songs of all time. Paul is helping on it. John's helping with it, with the pomegranate and cauliflower lyrics and stuff. Very funny. But then they close in on, here's Yoko, the other previous day, I'm saying some good stuff about her, finally showing some life. But in this segment, during Something, Yoko looks like her puppy dog just died or something. She's just kind of, I'm like, my first thought was, will you smile, woman? Come on. But anyway, again, not an insult, just an observation. Like, oh, did that poor woman's dog just pass away or something? What's going on with her? Then they go to a really cool part. It was very brief, but very telling. They go back to the beginning, folks. So moving and really made me smile. They do a little brief bit of Love Me Do. Wow. To take it all the way back to that first single, I thought that was fabulous. One general observation I made about this episode is that it's not as emotional with the highs and lows as episodes 1 and 2 was, but just as riveting, just as enjoyable. They're working out material. They're prepping for the rooftop. You still got that fly on the wall experience, but the emotional highs and lows that were drawing me in part 1 and 2 don't quite seem to be here. There's a little bit of drama which comes up a little later, which I'll tell you about, but I didn't feel that same pull of the emotions in this episode. Kind of telling, at one point, Paul leaves to go to a meeting, and so they do a cool workout without Paul of I've Got a Feeling. You got John on the lead vocals, which was very nice, kind of cool. John, George, Ringo, very cool doing it. And the feeling I got is Paul's not even there, and here are the other three. It's someone else's song, but they all have a vested interest in it. They want to get I've Got a Feeling right, and it's very apparent with this song that they want to get it right. And so even though Paul's not there, come on, the three of us, we're going to work on it again. That says a lot for these guys and their feelings towards one another and each other's music, folks, at least in my opinion. But then here's where it takes a little dip a little bit for me, is then John starts bringing up Alan Klein, and him, Ringo, and George are all in the room. Again, Paul's not there. And they start having this Alan Klein conversation. Now, it's very interesting stuff. John is very high on Alan Klein. He's all about Alan Klein. And, it's just like, it just kind of brought it down a little bit for me when John's raving about Klein, because we all know what Klein ended up being, just a con man and a charlatan. But John's high on this guy. And they work on more of Old Brown Shoe very briefly, but then it's funny how they're working on Old Brown Shoe briefly, and then George starts talking to Mal about bringing in a shoe salesman to maybe get him some shoes from the shop that he can look at. And it's funny, we learn a little piece of trivia. George apparently is a size 8 in the UK anyway. I don't know what that translates to the US, but very cool. Paul comes back after his meeting, more song workups. John is joking with George Martin about, they start having a quick conversation, and John basically jokes with George Martin that he's going to thump him. And he goes, remember Bob Wooler? Effing right. Peace on earth. Very funny moment. Take note of that when you watch part 3. More workups of songs. I Want You, She's So Heavy. It's unreleased originals and snippets of things, but it's so engaging and so interesting. Okay, and to end this day, on day 19, the general feeling I got is like, oh no, this is where all the fun got ruined, because at the end of this day, it's the first group meeting with Klein to end the day. And, we know how that went, especially with Paul. So, I wish it never happened, that meeting, but it did, and it ends up ruining all the fun, apparently down the road. So January 29th comes, day 20th, which is the Wednesday, and there's brief Klein talk in the beginning to start the morning with John, Ringo, Yoko seem very entranced by Alan Klein. But Glyn Johns, to his credit, is trying to warn them about Klein and kind of say, on some level, he's trying to say to them, yeah, I know you like the guy, but, I've had some dealings with him, and there's something weird about him. He's not quite right, but, Ringo's idea is like, well, I'd rather have a con man who's for us than against us. No, Ringo, that's quite naive. You don't want a con man on any level, okay? So, mistake there, boys. But anyway, we know what happened with that. More rooftop discussion. Paul is skeptical, obviously. He's not sure if he wants to do it. And a funny moment, bathroom humor moment, Ringo announces that he farted. Okay, which I laughed my butt off when that happens. Like, where did that come from? Ringo says, hey, I thought I'd let you all know rather than stay silent about it. He lets Paul turns and kind of walks away a little bit. I thought that was hilarious moment, really funny. But then we get some rising drama that finally happens in part 3. A little bit of drama. Paul's discussing about the band direction with John. They're doing kind of a one-on-one discussion. Glyn Johns is present. Eventually, George Martin tries to interject, and Paul says, "Well, that's why I'm talking to John, not you." It gets a little dicey there for a moment, talking with some band discussion and direction and whatnot, But John, I got to say to his credit, he really pushes for following through with the rooftop show. George offers some input also. Glyn is very sensible in trying to convince Paul that they need to do this. And Paul, he just seems very frustrated on this day. He seems like he needs to chill out a little bit, to kind of give a little jab to Paul. I mean, Paul, calm down a little bit. At this point, he needs to chill, He's getting a little too worked up over this. But Ringo and John are all for the roof. George doesn't want to do the roof, but he's willing to do it if everybody else was. And then, of course, Paul is kind of a no at this point. But, at least it appears so at this point. But they start working out, if we do go on the roof, what songs we're going to do and whatnot. And let's jam on the workout. We see Mike McCartney for the first time, which I thought was pretty cool. Day 20 continued. George talks about a solo LP, which I thought was very interesting, getting the songs out of the way. John seems very, very encouraging about this. And it's a shame they didn't explore this more, because if they had just taken a break, let George do a solo thing, maybe Paul, John, whoever, do your solo things, and then get back together in a year or two and keep the Beatles going. George was very insightful with this, I thought. Like, let me go off and do my thing. I'll do a few songs, and and he even says, quote, "We'll preserve the Beatles thing more." Like, meaning we'll keep this going. If we take a break, do our solo thing, come back, we'll keep the Beatles thing going more. So very insightful of George, and a shame it never came to fruition. Very hot jam with Billy and John singing I Want You melody of a song, I Had a Dream. Really kicks butt, really good rockin'. The clenched teeth version of Two of Us is very funny. Then we get to January 30th. Day 21, Thursday, the roof day. They do the setup segment where they tell about the cameras. There's going to be 5 cameras, 1 across the street, 3 at the street level, 1 hidden in the reception area. Really cool inside information. They're still uncertain whether they're going to go, but you could just tell that this is about to happen. The tension's rising, the excitement's rising, and you already got folks on some of the other rooftops. So somehow the word leaked out, or the word got out that something's cool is going to happen. Pre-show prep, seeing that lots of pre-show prep was very fun, I thought. The sound is phenomenal once they get going with some little bit of sound checking. And as they really kick into it, all of a sudden it goes to something that hasn't done the whole special, a split screen showing different angles. Not all the time, but, I love the split screen. I thought it was cool because you get one part where John flubs a line of "Don't Let Me Down," I think it was, but then in another shot you can see George laughing about it, which you wouldn't have seen in the original Let It Be film because it just showed John flubbing the line. And I just loved it. The Beatles are just so into this rooftop performance, acknowledging the crowd, looking down, leaning over, looking down at what's happening on the street. New street comments are presented and they're fun. I just love the new perspectives we're seeing with that split screen, different camera angles, different comments from the street. The crowd comments at first were a little bit annoying. I was like, oh, why are they cutting into the music? But I'm sure when we get the DVD Blu-ray, we'll get the entire rooftop concert without people talking. Maureen's really into it. You can see her off to the side, shaking her head, grooving to the music. But Yoko, again, looks like a piece of 2x4 leaning against the wall. She's really not doing too much, not smiling, just kind of sitting there. And let me get through this. Ringo wails on I've Got a Feeling. One of the versions of I Got a Feeling. He's hot, man. He's just pounding away. Very cool from Ringo. Interesting expressions when the Bobbies arrive from the Beatles. They don't get dragged off. The Bobbies are actually pretty reasonable. They're pretty, they're pretty understanding about what's going on for the most part. And when the sergeant gets there, he's awesome. He's very polite, very professional, very understanding. And eventually the sergeant pulls the other PCs off the roof, and there's no dragging the Beatles off the stage, although I know that's what they wanted. It's funny when Mal unplugs the amps of John and George, and they end up plugging them back in. John does his famous quote at the end, of course. And I like seeing the immediate aftermath stuff downstairs. They're talking in the control room, listening back. Very real reactions, facial expressions, and whatnot. Very cool to see everybody down there crammed in there, pride, the joy they're showing. And they decide the next day, the final day, January 31st, the last day to record the stuff they couldn't do on the roof, like Two of Us, Let It Be, Long Lenny Road. And then it kind of, for me anyway, and I'm not complaining, I love this show, touched me so much, folks. But it ends kind of on a whimper, a little bit abruptly with, credits come in and then outtakes of what they're doing that last day with quips, comments, some funny stuff, showing their personalities, all great stuff, but it's kind of like a blooper reel at the end, and it just kind of goes, it kind of goes out on a little bit of a whimper, I thought, but I'm not complaining, folks. So overall, I thought part 3 was fabulous. Great series overall, folks. I mean, we are so blessed to have received this gift. We've been removed from their presence in real time for half a century, and those of us that were there, this helps us relive our wonderful childhoods, our youth, and more innocent time in our lives. And for those who were not there or do not remember it, it gives you a real good insight as to what it was like. And I believe it was going to bring new fans to the Beatles. And it's going to remain a document for the ages, folks. I really believe that with this. What the magic was all about. How they changed the world in a positive way forever. The Beatles did it, folks. They've touched my life. And again, I will close this as I opened it. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Thanks for what you did for me all those years ago by bringing the Beatles into my life and sharing them with me in 1964. It's changed my life forever, Mom and Dad. I love you both. I love my family and friends. I love all of you. And I thank you. God bless.